Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us at our Future Tritons Parents and Family Insights webinar. This is going to be a webinar applicable for both first year and transfer students. And even though this isn't our first webinar, this is actually our first kickoff webinar regarding fall 2026 cycle. So we are really excited to have you here. In today's session, our goal is to provide you with helpful information to support your student as they consider applying to UC San Diego. We'll address perhaps some common concerns, provide helpful tips and insights to help make the process feel more manageable as a parent or family member. The information we'll cover is designed to once again just be informative, and this does not have any effect to your student's application process. Before we begin, here are a few housekeeping notes. This 60-minute webinar is designed to be informative. It really is designed for you to get a better understanding of what UC San Diego has to offer and what students should keep in mind. We will not be taking live questions during the presentation. However, we encourage you to engage with the content that we drop in the chat, clicking those helpful links, and also be ready with a notebook and a pen to take some notes. Today's webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be available in about 2 weeks on our undergraduate admissions events recording page. So you'll be able to revisit this information at your own pace. Most importantly, this webinar, once again, will not impact your student's application in any way. It is simply for you to learn about UC San Diego. Also, according to UC policy, please understand that as a parent and a family member, we will not be able to provide your student with or provide you with student information content. So based on UC policy, we as staff representatives can only communicate and provide essential information on a student-to-student contact. So please ensure that if you have questions, you ask your student to contact us directly. I'd like to share a few quick highlights. Our undergraduate admissions events team has put together a diverse lineup of weekly webinars designed for parents, counselors, and prospective students. We encourage you to visit the undergraduate admission events page located under the visit section on our undergraduate admissions website. This upcoming month, we'll be hosting special spotlight webinars featuring academic schools and departments, which will be very helpful and insightful for your student, along with Friday in-person events, an enhanced tour here at campus, which is a great opportunity to explore UC San Diego if you are in the vicinity. Be sure to bookmark our events page and register early as spots often get filled up quickly. Again, if you're joining us late or missed any of our earlier September parent webinars, or if you'd like to watch some of our student-focused sessions, you can visit our event recordings page on the undergraduate admissions website under resources. Recordings are typically posted about 2 weeks after each event, so be sure to check the page regularly to stay up to date. And lastly, if you need any assistance or clarification regarding your student's personal circumstance, please encourage your student to contact us via the Contact Us form on the undergraduate admissions website located under the resource section. Here, they can submit inquiries directly, and one of our staff members will correspond with them as soon as possible. Or as a parent and or counselors, if we have any here, you can also explore our FAQ section, which really addresses many of the common questions and concerns that we have. Our team is constantly updating our websites to ensure that we are tackling those FAQs that come in year over year. And without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our MC for this special webinar, or should I say our guest speaker for this webinar, Jim Rollins. He holds the position of Associate Vice Chancellor. Also, here we love acronyms, so that is an AVC of Enrollment Management at UC San Diego. So, Jim, I will hand it off to you.
Griselda, thanks so much. And everyone, we're really glad you're here today. As Griselda has mentioned to you, this is a webinar that's focused on parents and families. And I just want to say, we know there's a couple of actual students in here, and you're perfectly welcome as well. But you should know, I'm going to be thinking mainly about parents and families when I talk about things today. And maybe if you're here instead of your folks, maybe you'll be able to pass some things along to them, and we'll appreciate that too. So this is going to be a webinar today. We're going to do a monthly series of these, by the way. So across here, I know a lot of you are related to a high school student. So across the senior year, we may even have some families here who have a student who's a transfer student. We're going to do one of these about once a month for most months of this academic year. So we have a lot of things going on for students as well. But I try to make sure that we have something just for the parents and families as well. And so that's our focus not only today, but in the coming months. This is going to be the only one of these where you're stuck with just me. And following this one with the October webinar and beyond, we'll always have a special guest with me or two, somebody who is really involved with an important program on campus, somebody that we just think you all would find very interesting or can help you know how we take care of your students if they come here. But either way, this is meant to be a webinar that helps you feel like we're drawing back the curtain. Again, I am not an admissions reader. Some of you, your students may have even been to a lunchtime webinar I hear we did earlier today, Griselda tells me, where we had insights from a couple of our admissions officers on what they do and what they look for. I'm not that person. I'm their boss. And so I'm going to give you all some big picture things. And we'll tell you a little bit today about some of the things that we think makes UC San Diego special. We certainly want to put our best foot forward for you today. And many of the questions you all submitted ahead of time were about that. But I'm going to try to mix that with a good balance of broader advice and perspectives that we hope will help you with your students' broader search for college. I will tell you, I think we're an amazing place for your student to consider coming, but we're definitely not the only amazing place out there by a long shot. And as much as we get very competitive, those of us that work in the admissions and enrollment management world, we want to win the students that we admit. We also know that there's a great place for everybody, and it's not always us. So I'm going to hopefully give you all some information that helps you with other things besides just learning about UC San Diego today. We hope you'll find it all helpful. I will tell you, usually when we do these webinars, we have maybe 3 or 4 dozen people submit a question. I think the most I'd ever seen 100. We had hundreds of you all submit questions this time. And I'm definitely not going to be able to answer all of these, but a lot of them look the same after a while. But I will try to incorporate some of that into the comments I'll share today. Griselda mentioned to you that this is made available as a recording later. So if you missed something and you want to come back to it, or you just are trying to remember something, that will be available for you. So one of the things I'm going to do today, and I'm not going to have my screen sharing going on too much. I'm just really here to talk with you all. I want to show you all a few things about our website as a part of telling you some things about who we are. And meanwhile, Griselda will occasionally put some things in the chat area to either give you a link to something I'm talking about, or it looks like right now she's reminding you about registering for other events. But for the moment, let me just take a while because a lot of the questions you all sent in today were, I want to know about this program or that program. And our undergraduate admissions page, which is surprisingly enough, admissions.ucsd.edu. This is the same place, by the way, where she told you all you could go here and see the links to events like upcoming webinars. The resources is where you can see recordings of events. So I'm going to the same page Griselda was telling you about. But one of the most popularly visited pages on our entire website is the one it should be. Under the Why UC San Diego, you come to majors. So just to let you know how we organize this, because again, I can't begin to talk about all the different majors today. We have about 80 different departments and multiple majors in many of them. So you can be in about 160, I think it is, different majors here. Some of them even have minors or specialty areas, a lot of different things we can do. But if you go to those majors and programs, just to let you all know this before we start talking about other things about UC San Diego, we organize, like all universities, all of our departments into schools. So whenever you hear about somebody in the university setting called a dean, they're probably somebody who's over a set of departments. And so this is how we organize our schools. We have a School of Physical Sciences, a School of Engineering, School of Social Sciences, all those kinds of things. And if we click on one of these, which we'll do in a minute, you'll get to see some of the ways you'd navigate what's in here. I'll make a quick shout out before we do that, by the way, as I start to tell you some amazing things about this campus. UC San Diego has been around since 1960, but the oldest part of our campus, Scripps Institution of Oceanography, was around for almost 60 years before that. It's a very tiny part of our campus, maybe not even 2% of our undergraduates, but it is, talk about the granddaddy of them all. It is the kind of epicenter of almost all the research that's been done in the world on things like climate change, ocean changes, and a lot of that kind of study came out of here, again, back before this campus was even officially one of the UC campuses. So I just always put a plug in for that. If any of you out there are thinking about it, and I think we even had a few of you sign up mentioning you wanted to know more about things like marine biology, check out Scripps. It's also part of why this campus does indeed go all the way down to the beach, and we have our own pier. But either way, I want to just give you all some basics here because, again, there's way too many great things here to talk about. Let me pick engineering as a great example. There's a lot of our most popular majors in here, and I will talk about them when we talk about admissions in a few minutes. But you'll notice that a lot of the majors under engineering have an asterisk next to them. And you're going to see that on a few of the other pages as well. But as you start to know how we're wired, how we're kind of constructed here, and you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that the asterisk means these are what we call selective majors. I know we've got especially a lot of families here from California who may have sometimes heard the word capped majors over the years, either from us or the Cal States. We don't use that word here, but it has some things in common with what you might have heard. So whenever we list a selective major, what we're basically telling you is that there are this small number of majors on our campus that even if you're admitted to the university, your student may not automatically get into that department, so that if they don't get in, they need to understand they may have to compete to get in later. So it's a very complicated thing, but an essence that I would tell you all kind of right as we start this webinar today is as many of you look at certain majors on our campus, I will tell you that if your student decides to apply to us and wants a major that has an asterisk, I will strongly recommend that your student thinking about at least one second choice major that they think they might want to study. And frankly, it should probably do well for that to be a non-selective major. Many students come to college wanting to change their minds about their major anyway. But if your student really, really says, my heart is set on this, we just want them to understand up front, there's a few things that are harder to get into than others. Again, that's not everything. I just started with engineering right away. I'm going to go back here for a second and pick a different one like the arts and humanities. And you will hardly see any asterisks here at all. In fact, I don't think we have any unless it's in a place, yeah. So no asterisks in our arts and humanities school, but I know we had at least a few questions about music. That doesn't mean that you don't have to audition for certain things in music. So you will want to check with them on how that works. So that's probably one of the main exceptions. So that's one thing up front about our school, and we'll come back to this as I talk about how our admissions process works here, give you that insider's view in a few minutes. But the other main thing I want to just tell you all about from the undergraduate admissions page right now is that if you go under Y to the very next thing, you'll see a word that we use in a very different particular way here. So the colleges here, we do in a way that almost no other institution in the United States does. And in fact, it's a very, I would say, British concept. Pretty much ever since our founding under one of our original leaders, Roger Revelle, UC San Diego has kind of broken course from most other US institutions to do like British schools like Oxford and Cambridge have done for hundreds of years. And that is that while you're studying all over our campus, you also belong to a smaller community that is about where you live. It's about some slight differences in the way you do your general education requirements. And that means the classes that you would take regardless of what your major is. And if nothing else, as it says right here at the top of the page, when we have about 10,000 incoming first year and transfer students combined in each year, we do this as our best way to kind of break the university system down into smaller groups. And so each of our colleges we have is a similar in size, and we have housing enough that not only do most students their first year get to live on campus, we guarantee it for your first 2 years. 99 times out of 100, if not more, you will live in a residence hall that is in your college. And what that means is that some of your gen ed requirements, such as your freshman writing, will be very close to where you live. Some of your academic advising will be right there. Some of your dining options will be right in those buildings you live in or right next door to them. So it's one of these best of both worlds things because we don't make you stay in that part of campus. It just becomes a home within the bigger place for you. I wish more institutions in the US did it, but they just don't. And again, it is really a special part. One of the first things we'd want you to know that makes us different is that your student's going to be able to be a part of this. Now, I know some families are and are not into the whole Harry Potter thing from a few years ago, but if you have any knowledge of that, you may be thinking this sounds a whole lot like Hogwarts. And we are the sorting hat in the admissions office. When we admit students, we work with them to figure out where they're going to go. We will ask your students what their preferences are when they apply, and we will do our best to put them in one of their top choices for one of these colleges. So that's a very particular way we use the word here. I think it's one of our best kept secrets, and we're trying to not make it a secret. So we'll just tell you why we think this is a really great way for your student to see how we're going to give them community within this bigger place. We just started fall classes today, and it is a great time to see all over campus. We have, actually, it might be a little closer to 10,500 or 11,000 students this fall. We'll know for sure once the dust settles. But we do have a pretty large campus of about 7,500 freshmen probably this year. Again, we'll finalize that in the coming weeks. About 3,500 transfer students. And especially those of you from California should know that part of this is by design. We are expected by the state of California to make sure that about 1/3 of our offers of admission to Californians each year go to students from California community colleges, and the other 2/3 go to high school students. So that's part of how this works. Transfers, again, are part of that. On the first year side, we're always trying to balance out serving a lot of students here in the state of California, but we also warmly, warmly welcome students from out of state, and we have almost every state represented on this campus, and also students from all around the world. And I haven't checked, but I believe we do have some non-US participants in this webinar today, so welcome. So that's a few things about our website, and I don't want to keep this up here all day. But beyond this, I want to start talking with you a little bit more about some of the other great things about this campus. First of all, just so you'll know, and I'm not all that into rankings all the time, but this is perennially ranked as one of the top public institutions in the US. Beyond that, even in some global rankings, we are very frequently considered one of the top public institutions in this country. Really shows up well. But here's the part where I look right at you through the camera and I say, so what? We're very proud that a lot of places look at how we serve students, the kind of students we attract, the faculty we have, the research that they put out. And as much as that's great, let me be one of the folks to tell you that absolutely shouldn't be the way you pick an institution. It's an interesting piece of information that's sometimes helpful, sometimes distracting, because the real question is, will this school be a good fit for your student? Is it a place where they feel like they will be able to be themselves to really keep pushing ahead? And again, there's lots of different schools that can do that in different ways. And we would never tell you that we are the best fit or one of the top 3 fits for every student that's out there. I was even pleased. I happened to see a very highly regarded writer that many of us in my profession know, Jeffrey Salingo. This is his brand new book, by the way. I'll mainly plug it because selfishly we're listed in here, we learned. We're one of his 75 dream schools in the US that he's highlighting in his latest publication. And again, Jeff has his various reasons for doing that. If you like that kind of thing, hey, we're in there. You can read a tiny bit more. He wrote this much about us in there, at least in the back of the book. But what we want you to know is that we are most proud of things like the fact that among all the UC campus system campuses, there's 9, by the way, in this UC system, we are the second most applied to of any of them. We enroll more undergraduates than any other campus in the UC system. We are very proud to have 13,000 Pell Grant recipients, which is a measure of family income, meaning we're serving really broad segments of all of this state's community very well. Many other things that we're well known for. A lot of the engineering disciplines are very famous, but we also have fantastic programs. I mentioned Scripps Institution of Oceanography, one of the top 5 theater programs in the country, a whole bunch of other things that are great. And again, when you combine that with the college system, it really makes for an unusual opportunity that I would argue you're really not going to find much of anywhere else in the US. Shout out to Canada. If any of you are looking at the University of Toronto, they are the only other school in North America I know of that does something very similar to us. So we talk with them quite a bit. So we have a lot of options for you, some things that are going to go well. If your student is indeed a high school senior or finishing their transfer experience at a community college or wherever else right now, They do have just a few more weeks, it feels like, to turn in their applications. But I want to make sure you know that one of the most fundamental practical things we'll walk off today here early in the fall is that your student has until the end of November, and it might even be December 1st this year. I'm going to have Curtis and Griselda fact check me on that. But either way, we do have a deadline. It's very straightforward, and your student must turn their stuff in by that date or they will be too late. We are very firm on that deadline because we have to be, and a lot of stuff comes in. And so after that, we are shut down for new applications, and we only take students to start in the fall. We don't have mid-year enrollment like some institutions do around the country. Another thing I can tell you we don't have here, because I think that's just as important, is that we don't have what we call early application programs. There are a lot of institutions out there that will do what they call early decision or early action. If you haven't heard those terms before, both of them involve an earlier deadline and a later deadline, possibly more than two deadlines. An early decision means that institution is saying, not only if you apply early, will we get back to you sooner, but you're promising us if you're admitted, you're going to take our offer and turn down everybody else. The University of California campuses don't believe in that. We believe you should have the entire time to make up your mind and let that be our problem as to whether you picked us or not. We also don't do early action, which is where some universities will give you an earlier deadline where you still hear back earlier. And for that reason, I want to make it really clear. No one who is listening to me today should think that your student will have an advantage to turn their application in before the end of November, that there'll be any kind of disadvantage for not turning it in sooner. It just doesn't matter. There's many other things that do. But please know that you're not behind. Your student's not behind. They've got a good couple of months here to work on things, all of the months of October and November following the end of this month. And we want them to mainly take their time and really put their best foot forward to think about what they're doing, everything from what they write in their applications to us, to which majors they're picking, which colleges they're ranking as their top areas of interest. We want them to really make sure they've had a chance to think this through. It is human nature that many of our applicants will apply in the last 3 or 4 days before the deadline. And again, it's perfectly okay. On the other hand, if you want to apply early, you're probably helping our staff spread out the work. So I will say thanks for that, but that's about it. You got a lot of questions from you all in the forum about how does admissions work. So let's tell you a little bit about that next. One of the things to know is that I have to talk differently with you about first year or freshman admission than transfer admission. Again, I think we're very heavy on the first year side, so I'll talk more about that. But let me talk about transfers first. The vast majority of our spots in the incoming class for transfer students each year are for students from California community colleges. And again, that has to do with our agreement with the state. It also has to do with the fact that when you're coming to us as a transfer student, we require you to be about halfway done with your degree and to be ready to go right into the major you say you want to pursue. And so we call that major prep or major preparation. And if you go back to that majors list that I pulled up, you will see that, again, just like some majors have the selective asterisk and others don't, some majors have major prep requirements and other ones don't. So any of you who have a student at a California community college, tell your student to make sure if their major has major prep requirements, that they're working on those right now and that we'll have them done by this spring. They will need to be able to show us that even though we won't see their spring transcripts when they apply and we offer them admission, but we have to see they are getting that done. And just to give you a very extreme example, a student could have a 4.0 GPA at a community college and done all kinds of just general things right. But if they want a major that has major prep requirements and they've missed 2 or 3 of those, it's not going to happen. We have so much demand here that we absolutely have to prioritize our space for the students that are ready to come here and be completed in 2 years. And frankly, part of that's to make room for the next student. And so it's part of how we balance that out. Transfers, the other main thing I can tell you is that they have the same deadline, but they will hear back from us a little later in the year simply because we have so much volume we need to work our way through. So the last thing I'll say for transfers before we flip over to first year students is that transfers, again, you have to apply by the end of November. And you'll probably hear a decision from us in, let's say, mid-April. Could be a little later, could be a little earlier, but basically think mid to late April. And those students have until June 1st to accept our offer of admission or to break our hearts and say, no, thanks, I'm going to some other school. Again, that'll happen. We'll be okay. All right. So before I switch over to the first years, I just want to acknowledge Griselda is just killing it with all the links she's putting here in the chat. Griselda, thanks so much for that. Again, I'm giving you all a lot of information that you can follow up on later, but just to let you know, I think it's great that you've got links about the selective majors, the dates and deadlines, the details on first year and transfer admission requirements, what we look at, what you have to turn in. So with that said, let me turn our attention to first year students for a little bit. First year students make up the vast majority of the applications we get here. We really don't like to freak families out, but on the other hand, this is a webinar about making things transparent and pulling back the curtain. So let me tell you, this is the second most applied to school in the United States. And I told you we have about 7,500 freshmen this year, first year students. That was selected from a pool of over 136,000 students. And that number includes in-state students, out-of-state students, international students. And actually, each of those three groups has its own separate process going on. We have funding from the state and priorities that we set about our campus where we know we're going to make room for a certain number of California residents. And again, Californians, we are your state's institution, so that is going to be where the majority of the spaces are. And we also get a lot more students from California to apply. So as we go through our process each year, we know how many Californians we can take. We have an estimate of how many of them will accept our offer versus decide to go somewhere else. And then we have the same thing for out-of-state students and for international students. So with those three groups, we're trying to do a lot of mixing things together to get the right balance of things. I often tell students not to think of how we do admissions as something where we just say, oh, let's go down the list until we run out of room, and we'll just draw the line at this GPA, and that's what it took to get in this year. That is the opposite of what a holistic review process is. And you may hear a lot of institutions around the country throw around that word holistic. I don't know about you all, but for the longest time, I always got the picture of like somebody like swinging a new age crystal over your student's essay. That's not what we mean by holistic. But on the other hand, it does mean that there's a lot of things we consider. And then for better or for worse, because we know this can be a relief and it can also be frustrating, it means we can't tell you exactly what it's going to take to get in. But I think that's a good thing overall because we don't think the same things tell us the most about a student as they do for another student. And so we ask them to share a lot of information. We take it all into account. And then we're going to try to balance that out with what we're looking for. I'm a musician by background, by the way. I played in orchestras before I went into higher education. It's kind of my secret past life. And I really think about this like picking all the members of an orchestra. And if any of you have ever been to an orchestra concert, you know there's a whole bunch of violins. There's a few fewer violas and cellos, the string basses. You have one guy playing the big kettle drums. That was me, by the way. That's what I played. You have about 3 or 4 trumpets. There's different parts of the orchestra where we have more spots we need to fill. There's other places where we have fewer. And that kind of plays into some of what goes into our thinking at a university like this. When we have all these different options and all these different applicants, we're not looking at everybody the same way because not everybody is trying to get shoved in this one seat in the back of the violin section. We're thinking about all these different things you bring to the campus, the things you want to do once you get here. And it's why we don't think we should start by saying we're going to draw a line and you're either over or under it. So here's a few things that matter when we look at your student's application. And just like I did before, let me start with actually what doesn't matter. We have for 3 or 4 years now, the University of California system, along with the California State University system, and several other private institutions in this state, we have elected to go not just test optional, but test free. And to help you with those true terms, kind of like we talked about with early action and early decision, there's a lot of these terms that different universities will use with you. And just to make sure you know, when universities say they are test optional, which is by right now the most common scenario for testing policies around the country, there's a very famous small segment that have gone back to requiring SAT or ACT scores after the pandemic, when a lot of us experimented with this. But the vast majority of schools in the United States right now that use test scores are saying they're optional. They say, you turn them in if you want, you don't have to. If they're there, we'll look at them. If they aren't, we're going to look at what you do send us. What the UC system instead decided to do, which is much less common, is by saying test free, we've decided we're not even going to give you the opportunity to submit scores. And if you're a really good test taker, that was also me in high school, you're going to be really disappointed to hear that because you're like, but I killed it on the SAT. Good for you. But that is not how we're deciding on students anymore. And it's a long, complicated decision, but it's something, again, we decided at the system level, and it's been in place for a while. I honestly think we learn plenty about you without that one indicator that comes from a single test you took for 3 hours on a Saturday morning. It may or may not add to what we know about you, but either way, we have decided to simply do without it. The other thing we will not consider is teacher recommendations. So you may have a terrific counselor or teacher that wants to write a letter for you. If you're filing an app with Common App schools and many others around the country, they downright require or at least expect and use rec letters. We do not use those here. Part of our thinking there is A, we have such a massive volume, we do have to decide what we're looking at, and we only have so much time. B, we know that not every student has access to the same resources, to the same reference letter writers, recommendation letter writers, and we want to really try to level the playing field in this part. So whatever you hear from me now, I want to make sure everybody knows we are not going to consider your test scores. We're not going to consider a rec letter. What we do is we look a lot at your academics, not just the GPA, but things like the rigor of the classes you've chosen, the trends in your grades, whether things have gone up or down or stayed the same. If you're good in certain subjects or not others, our readers will see that. And then we really do a lot with that to do what we call local context. So especially Californians, you should hear this loud and clear. We know a lot about your high school. We've gotten a ton of applications from it over the years. And we will understand some things about how many honors or AP or IB courses you offer. We'll know some things about the tendencies to have college in the high school or dual enrollment classes available. We'll even be able to see some things about how your GPA lines up with other students from your school. And so oftentimes students want to know, well, I've got this GPA and it means this at my high school, and over at that high school, it doesn't mean the same thing. So this is just me telling you, we know, we get it. And especially within the state of California, we have enough data that we can really keep that kind of thing in mind. If you're from out of state or abroad, it's much more likely that we won't have that much information. Your school, by the way, does have the ability to let us know a little bit of that information. They can give us what's called a school profile if they work with the UC Office of the President, but mainly just know we won't think about that kind of stuff as much. We'll just look more at you, the student, unless you happen to come from an out-of-state school that we've gotten a lot of applications from over the year. We're going to look at students' little mini essays that we call the PIQs. We're going to look at your list of activities, accomplishments. It could be things like a job you've held, an award you've gotten, some other kind of leadership, sports, academics, whatever you do. There's a great part of that. And if you're wondering what a lot of people are wondering, they're like, what do we most want to see from your activities? So spoiler alert, the real answer is there is no kind of activity we value more than another. And I think you'll find that's good news. Again, some of you may be going, but I have the best activity. We're trying to keep it balanced. Here's my advice, and this comes not just from being here, but having been in the profession for over 30 years and worked at 4 or 5 different public flagship universities in different states. I don't want you to think that we want to see more activities. If anything, the more things you're involved with, the less time we know you can ever commit to any of them. And we want to see what you chose to spend your time on, and can we tell once you leave, will what you've done made a difference? Will people even realize you're gone, and will you have been changed or impacted in some way by it yourself? Those are the things you want to talk about is with the application. So we'll look at that, your PIQs, a lot of local information about your school and your grades. But I do want to really emphasize at the end of the day, your grades are a huge part of what we're going to consider. And this is coming to college after all. So of course, we should mainly look at how you've done academically, especially if you haven't done well at first and you're doing better. Don't let that stop you from applying, or don't let it stop your student from applying. I'm slipping into talking to the students here. Watch out. But really keep that kind of stuff out there. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about with our admissions process that will tie back to the majors for a minute. I'm going to share my screen again. We're going to look at a few different things here because I want to show you all how the University of California tries to make stuff transparent. So as you all think about the majors that you might look at or that your students might look at, I do want you to keep in mind that more and more over the last few years, as the number of applications we have received has increased, we have had to think about the major that a student wants to pursue more than ever. And while most students are admitted by us saying they're a strong student overall, let's let them study what they want to when they get here, there's a small list of majors, and they tend to be those selective ones, where we just have way too much demand to be able to meet. I'll offer an obvious example that a lot of people already know. Computer science and engineering has always been one of those where we have a disproportionately huge number of applicants who want that major. So we do have to take that into account. And this is one of the reasons we always encourage students with a selective major listed first to have at least one other thing listed as a second choice. And I also want you to know we welcome students who mark themselves down as undeclared. But keep in mind, if you do that thinking, oh, I really want this difficult to get into major, but I'll come in that way and then I'll flip over, those selective majors won't let you just flip over. So don't try that as an end around because it'll end up just hurting you in the end. This is why we just talk about it with you openly right now. So let me share this screen real quick. I've got a few tabs open here. So besides our major, I want to take you now to the University of California's page. And so just so you'll know, there's a whole range of things that are here. Again, I worked for multiple public institutions over the years. And I can tell you that by far, this state's flagship system, the UC's, I would argue we are the most transparent public institution in the United States. We try to make so much information available so people can just see it and they can understand what's going on. Even then, it doesn't always tell you everything because not everything can be reduced to a chart. But look at this URL up here, and Griselda may put it in the chat as well. So if you go not to our university, but to the university system, universityofcalifornia.edu, they have something called the Information Center here. And when you come down here, it has a ton of information on a lot of subjects. But you can go down here to the subjects and simply pick undergraduate admissions and hit apply. And you will get access to a ton of information beyond what I'm going to tell you all about today. I know who you are because I was one of these parents when my own son and daughter went off to college years ago. If you're the parent who's like, oh, I want to play with numbers, knock yourself out in here. There's things in here where we're trying to report out to the state, to the legislature, to the public. We point the media to these things sometimes. There's a lot of stuff in here where you can see how many applicants got in from your son or daughter's high school last year, how many transfer students came in from this county requesting this major. There's tons of stuff in here. So I just mainly want to introduce you all to this page, the Information Center, and again, go to admissions and filter it down. And then I want to show you a few things here that relate to my commentary about the admissions process here. So you're going to see I'm going to go over to a tab here. I'm just kind of shortcutting here. So I'm going to go to this page that we launched for the first time just last year called Freshman Admission by Discipline. So this page in the Information Center has been really interesting to put out there. I want to warn you that my office was literally the one that told the Office of the President they needed to put this in red at the top. You've got to use caution using and drawing conclusions from what's here. And we want you to talk more with us about what you see. But as I mentioned to you all, students who request certain majors don't get in at the same rate as students who request other majors. And this, again, it's complicated, but let's lay this out here for us and every other campus in the UC system. So you can go down here, for example, and you can pick UC San Diego. And pretty quickly, it'll show you things down here that say, for this past year, this is actually 2023. They don't have 2024 in here yet. But you can see from a couple of years ago, for example, we had 26,000 applicants requesting something in our School of Engineering. Within that, we only admitted 1,893, and about 900 of those students came. Now, this doesn't include computer science and engineering, but again, you see Office of the President is trying to put a lot of information in one place here. We'll show you things like the 25th to 75th percentile of the GPA of the students who enrolled wanting that discipline, and what admit rate and yield rate that means. By the way, any of you, if you haven't heard the word yield rate, all that means is the percentage of admitted students who accepted our offer and came here versus turned us down and went somewhere else. So you can really have a lot of fun in here. You can also get freaked out, so please don't get freaked out. But hopefully it'll help you understand a few things. So you should know that this gives you at least one insight into how the major your student chooses may relate to how we decide whether or not to admit them. But I've also got to tell you, it doesn't tell you the whole story. So the main thing I can tell you is if a student who wants something in, say, let's say in public health, and they get admitted to the university, they may not get admitted to the public health major. They may get into a second choice major, which was in social sciences. This dashboard, we call it, can't tell you all of those things. So we're mainly just telling you, did a student who wanted a major in this general area get offered admission to the university. We can't tell you everything. Add to this, by the way, a ton of our students will get admitted and then change their mind among the non-selective majors just by going through orientation or talking to a friend and thinking, wow, I really want to do that major instead. But this is just a snapshot. And I don't think we publicize this enough. So I hope you'll find this helpful. If it confuses you, let our office know. We'll see if we can walk you through it. But you can also really, if you don't watch it, you can misread things here. This flipped back to Berkeley, by the way. I'm going to flip it back over to San Diego. And now you can see these numbers changed. So sometimes it resets. It's a little clunky. But again, at least it's public, and we hope you'll find that helpful. One other thing I'll show you about this window right now is that the transfer version of this also exists. So coming back to our transfer students again, you go to a different place in the information center, but when you look for transfers by major, you get the same thing. It'll show you down here, but it's a lot more detailed. You can kind of look at these things. You'll even break it down by the community college the students came from. And you'll see all these kind of data on who's enrolled and what they're doing. So have fun with those things. All right, I'm going to show you one last UC dashboard thing, and then we're going to move on to a few last things for the day. This one here is called the Freshman Fall Admissions Summary. And just to offer you all an idea of all the other things that are available here, you can, and again, the UC is very much a believer in transparency. You can come in here. This was last updated in January of this year. We will show some things for multiple years about how students' admission worked out if they're freshmen or if they are residents or if they're a first generation student, all these kinds of things. How did things work out for students with A through G, which is our name for those lists of the minimum number of courses you've taken in English, math, social sciences, all those kinds of things. So we'll tell you students applying anywhere in the UC system who had 25 or more units in A through G, this was their admit rate. The number of applicants who had that, here's how many had this, all those kinds of things. So anyway, have fun with this. Don't go too crazy in there, but we want you to know that kind of information is out there. The last thing I want to spend our time on today, because we're running out pretty quickly, is just kind of stepping back from UC San Diego now. I've told you all a few things that I hope you feel like you've got some insider info on now. But also just to remind you what you might think of as insider info, we really do want to be public. It's not insider info. It's just that it's out there and not everyone knows where to look. So we hope this helped. But let's kind of step back from our particular institution. Depending on how you count, there are 2,500 to 3,000 places out there that your student could consider going to earn a bachelor's degree. We would humbly say we're doing among the best among those many options, but there's tons of things that are out there. And there's tons of things you should know are out there to help you figure out what's going on. I'm sad to say that things like rankings guides sometimes put too much importance on things that may not matter all that much to you. So be a critical consumer of that. If you're looking at, what are a few of them out there? Washington Monthly, Forbes, US News, there's a lot of them out there. If you ever look at those rankings and think, oh, I wonder why this school ranks better here than there, take a minute to read how they decide to rank schools. Some of them, it's just sheerly on things like the size of the applicant pool and how selective they are and how hard to get in. I think that's not a good measure. And I will tell you that as a school that has a massive number of applicants. Think in mind, by the way, we are one of the 2 biggest applicant pools in the country, but guess what? 6 of the 10 biggest applicant pools in the country are UC campuses. And that might have a little something to do with the fact that we have about 430,000 high school seniors graduating from the state of California this year. Literally 430,000. I used to live in the state just north of us, Oregon, where the entire state only graduated about 35,000 high school seniors a year. So if you think about the number of spots they have for students to go to college and the number we have here, the math just works really differently. So don't read too much into the admission rate at a school. What I really encourage you all to do with rankings and things that are out there is to think about, how do we take care of your student after they're there? What percentage of our student graduated and how long does it take them to get out? How many of them are able to get a job or go on to grad school after that? And there's some information out there that they do try to make centrally available to you. So my one last little website I'll show you all is what I think is a fairly objective place to do that. Before I show it to you, I don't mean for this to sound too political in my commentary, but I will tell you all, this is a website I'm about to show you all that's managed by the US Department of Education, which is going through some severe staffing and budget cuts. So I am very worried that this site is not going to be maintained much longer in the way it has been in the past. But let's nonetheless look at that site because it is still up, and I just think it's really terrific. So this is called College Navigator. It's at the National Center for Educational Statistics, or NCES. So if you want to see that URL, and Griselda might be able to add it to the chat, it's nces.ed.gov/College Navigator. And just starting with ourselves as an example, you can look up groups of schools, or you can look up individual schools. And once you find that school, it's going to have asked every university in the state, every university in the country to provide information in a very standard way that they can show you here. So you can not only look up some general information about whether you're a public or private, how many full-time and part-time students you have. You can see things about costs, financial aid, what we call net price, enrollment, admissions. There's a whole bunch of things here, outcome measures. And by the way, that's not going to just be graduation rates. It's going to ask questions like, how many students graduate with debt versus no debt? That's a very important thing that I know parents and families are sometimes thinking about more than the student. And I really encourage you all to talk about that. But you can come here and get some stuff that you know is measured the same way for every single institution you look up. You can even do something here where you add a school to your favorites and then add a few more, and then you can go up here and compare them. And they'll line up all the data for you at once, all the way across the page. I don't know if we have time to do that, but you get the idea, and I really encourage you to check it out. Just to tell you a little bit more about what's in here and how you can use it, and I hope you can see this because these fonts are pretty small. I'm going to see if I can make it a little bigger. Go here to something called net price. And you will see that the federal government collects data from us that's meant to tell you, even if there's a stated or sticker price, we might call it, for what it costs to go to that college. We know that we give financial aid based on need. And the UC, by the way, is among the very best in the country at supporting our own state's students. Sorry, we can't do that as well for non-Californians, but we're very proud of what we do in state. And we will basically say, based on your family's income, about how much it's going to cost you versus the total price tag. And the bottom line you can tell from something like this is that we do a lot to cut down on the expenses that students have. And this doesn't even take into account the fact that students can very easily get a part-time job working a certain number of hours per week, a certain number of weeks per year, whether it's through our work study program or not. And they can actually fill this gap before they're done. And so there's a lot of ways to make things very affordable. We are, of course, going to put our best resources towards the families with the lowest income. And you may be looking at this saying, well, I'm off the charts here. Is this not going to help me? But some of you, I know this really will prove helpful. And again, if you were to pull up 3 schools your student's looking at once in College Navigator, you could even see some of this information kind of laid out across the page. One other key thing I'm going to tell you all that's really important here, and I'm going to go to the admissions tab. It's very important for you all to remember that when universities talk about numbers, and I gave you an example of this on purpose earlier today. You might remember that I told you we had about 136,000 applicants last year, and we had 7,500 freshmen coming in this fall, rough numbers. But you would be really wrong if you took those 2 numbers and you thought you knew how many people we offered admission to. So when you go to a place like College Navigator, when you go to some of these other places that are out there, look at these 2 key numbers here. And this is a few years old because it takes Department of Ed a few years to catch up. But this year, where we had 130,000 apply, we only admitted about 25%. And then only about 22% of those we admitted picked us. So whenever you wonder about your chances of your student getting admitted never go straight from the, in our case, 136,000 to the 7,500. There's a very important number between those 2. And if anything, my closing message I always love to give families this time of year is your student's going to probably be really stressed about getting in. And they do need a little bit of stress because they really need to put their best efforts forward. But after all that's done, they're going to get to turn us down, or they're going to turn somebody else down. We hope they'll turn somebody else down and pick us. But I hope that's a really empowering message for you all to see. The Department of Ed doesn't try to put all the numbers on here, but this is very important. No school, and I mean no school, gets 100% of its admitted students to pick them. Harvard is an obvious example. Harvard doesn't get 100% of its admitted students to come. They have to make more offers of admission than they might like. I shouldn't characterize Harvard that way. But bottom line is every school is going to have some numbers that are like this. They're never going to be all or nothing. So make sure when you look at this stuff, you keep that kind of thing in mind. Going back to our transfer families again, unfortunately, no one puts as good of information out there for transfers as they do for first years, but you'll find some of this in other places. The last thing I'll show you all on this page that I think is so great is when you look at some things about outcome measures and retention and graduation rates. Very important. We take great pride in this, even if we're always looking at improving it. Look at universities your students looking at for what they call first year retention. So a number like this is very standardly measured across the country, and we have to officially report how many students, for example, today. We have to say what that exact number is in a report to the federal government. And then a year from now, when we're telling them about next year's class that we hope your student will be in, we have to go back and say, remember that number we gave you last year? Here's how many of them are back for their second year. And so for us to be at 94% is way up there compared to most other institutions around the country. But I can tell you, we still are always trying to get that number up even higher. We see part-time students not progress as far. There's a lot of things going on there. But either way, you can know that you might be worried this is a big place, but we're a big place that knows how to take care of our students. And this is one of our first indicators that that's going well. We also then get down here to the overall graduation rate. Some students will take 4 years, 5, 6. The federal government actually has us report all the way out to 8 years, and that's down the page here as well. We actually are up to a 91% rate now for one of our more recent cohorts, and we'll see how that goes. So when you look at this, keep in mind that these numbers have to do with who started. So it doesn't include transfer students. Again, sorry, transfer families. But for first year students, these students that leave, it's not as if 6% of them couldn't handle it. There might be a couple of students who couldn't handle it, but you know what's more common? These students, either for financial reasons, moved to someplace that was more affordable, or they thought they were going to get into major X and they couldn't get in. They found a university they could transfer to and get that major, and so they left. Our loss, not theirs. So keep in mind that there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on. So I've filled your thoughts with a lot of things that we hope will help you in the coming weeks as you look down the road with your student. We're going to go ahead and wrap up for today, but I just want to one last time really thank Griselda for all the URLs she's been putting in the chat here. We hope you all have really enjoyed what's here. We've had terrific turnout, and we're so glad to see all of you. We hope you'll come back for the other webinars that are coming up in October and beyond. Again, I promise you'll get to listen to somebody other than me for at least some of those next few times. But please know how much we enjoy helping you see things as they are, helping you get an understanding of the process. And we wish you all the best helping your student navigate this process for the coming year. We're going to go ahead and wrap up and wish you a good evening now. So thanks, everybody, and go Tritons.